group of firemen are on level 3 of a building, attacking a wild blaze, when one of the firemen gets the sneaking suspicion that something is different about the fire, only he can't pinpoint what. Overcome by fear, he shouts, "It's time to get out of here!" Luckily, his colleagues obeyed because a few seconds later, the floor on which they were standing collapsed. Unbeknownst to the firemen, the fire had actually begun on the floor below. As a result, it sounded a little different to most fires. The fireman who shouted, "It's time to get out of here," somehow noticed this. Without noticing, he noticed. We refer to this as intuition. Intuition can be thought of as the stuff we know without knowing we know it, the things we realize without realizing we've realized. And according to famous psychologist Daniel Kahneman, we all have expert intuition. Don't get too excited. Most of us can't predict markets or detect the early signs of a heart attack, but we can, like Kahneman, figure out our wife is angry from just one word she says on the phone. Kahneman's research has been well received, so well received in fact that he was awarded a Nobel Prize in economics, despite being a psychologist. Thinking Fast and Slow is Kahneman's intellectual memoir where he unpacks the curious way our minds process our environment. In the book, he introduces two characters to help us understand two different styles of thinking, System 1 and System 2. They will tell you at the end how Kahneman dumps on the systems. Let's first slow down and get to know these characters. So, System 1 is the fast system. It works quickly, saving us energy and time when processing the world. When we see the words vomit and banana next to each other, we automatically show repulse, as well as unconsciously form an association between the two words. This is the work of System 1. System 1 also takes over the driving when our mind drifts and slams the brakes at a sudden sign of danger while we're off daydreaming. System 1 responds with impulses and intuitions. But what do we do when our impulses and intuitions show us the wrong way to respond? Say for example, you are driving and begin to skid. If you hit the brakes, you lose total control. If you turn away from the skid, you only skid more. Every impulse we have is the wrong thing to do. That's where System 2 can get involved. System 2 is like a slower and deeper thinker that kicks in to do things that don't come as naturally. System 2 is capable of turning into the skid and keeping our foot off the brake, even though these seem like the wrong thing to do. Once System 2 learns to drive in a skid or do anything new, it becomes automatic and part of System 1 too. As Kahneman says, we are born prepared to perceive the world around us, recognize objects, orient attention, avoid losses, and fear spiders. Other mental activities become fast and automatic through prolonged practice. Let me ask you, if a bat and ball together costs $1.10 and the bat costs $1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? The number that comes to mind is probably 10 cents. Despite that, you're already looking for the trick in the question, doubting the obvious answer that comes to mind because you're clever. You're watching a YouTube video about when our natural thinking is wrong, so how could it be the obvious answer? And yet you still can't see it. You can't see why it's not 10 cents. No, don't get angry and unsubscribe. Let me put you out of your misery. If the ball costs 10 cents, the bat would cost $1.10, silly, and together they would make $1.20. The correct answer is that the ball costs 5 cents. But the curious thing about this problem is that most people arrive at the answer of 10 cents and don't think to check it. System 1 thinks it's done its job and doesn't bother System 2. But if I ask you what 17 times 24 is, System 1 doesn't think it knows the answer. It only has a ballpark idea, so it tugs on the sleeve of System 2 to work it out. I think of the differences between System 1 and 2 like the modern checkout area at the supermarket. System 1 is the machine, scanning store item barcodes and handling most of the process, while System 2 is the human attendant hovering in the background, keeping an eye on things but only intervening when called upon. The attendant is requested when the machines run into an issue, when they don't recognize something or fail to apply the late day discount. Like System 2, the attendant can only attend to one matter at a time. The machines have most store items pre-registered and recognize them instantly, but can't recognize new products they haven't seen before. Not until the attendant registers their barcode in the machine's memory. The machine relies on the barcode and can't recognize the item itself. If the customer switches the barcode of a more expensive item for a cheaper one, who would do that? Don't get any ideas. The machine will not notice the substitution. It won't raise an alarm. The attendant, who represents System 2, will not be called upon or notice the error. In summary, System 1 is near instant, is automatic and intuitive, uses little effort, relies on associative memory, acts even when we think we're being rational, and relies on mental shortcuts. It doesn't pay attention to what it does not know, jumps to conclusions without checking, and is in charge most of the time. System 2, by contrast, is slower, more conscious, and logical, and often goes against or overrides intuitive reactions. It is effortful when used, but spends most of its time in low effort mode. For example, things that it tends to can't be done while turning left into oncoming traffic. Unless you're in Australia where you'd be turning left on the right. Anyway, don't worry about that. System 2 is all about attention, and it's more of a problem solver. You can see why Kahneman is good friends with Nicholas Taleb, who I make a bunch of videos about on this channel. The question at the heart of Kahneman's work is, when is intuition good, and when is it bad? When can you trust it, and when can't you? He is famous for System 1 and 2, but here's the critical flaw we alluded to earlier. They don't really exist. There are no such systems in your head. And while we're on the subject, I should make it clear that there's no supermarket checkout aisle in your brain either. System 1 and System 2 are just characters who represent ways of thinking. Why does Kahneman do this? Why does he lie? His explanation? Because characters are easy to remember. They make it easy to think, which is what our brains seem to try and do time and time again. Make it easier to think.